from spring break on Thursday, just making sure that we were on the same page. So while you're studying, really the immune system is going to be the big one, followed by respiratory, followed by the lymphatic. Okay? Lymphatic's not that big, so I'll pretty much cover everything in the lymphatic system. Spleen, thymus, lymph nodes, galt, malt, that kind of stuff. All right. So we're here in the respiratory system. I'm going to finish it out today with mechanisms that regulate breathing. So as we said, and as we looked at in lab, if we blow carbon dioxide into water, we make carbonic acid. So it's going to be pH that we're going to look at as how much oxygen we need to bring into the body. Carbon dioxide is going to be what regulates our breathing, specifically pH. Okay? But because carbon dioxide is released from our tissues, that's going to cause the pH to go down, right? More CO2 means more acidic pH of the blood. So this says the medulla oblongata is going to receive this information from the receptors that are looking at blood pH. This happens in our bloodstream. It's also going to happen in our cerebrospinal fluid. Okay? So there are receptors that are looking at changes in the pH of the blood and of the cerebrospinal fluid. When we see a decrease in the pH, that information is sent to the medulla oblongata. Remember, the medulla oblongata is all about autonomic stuff, right? Okay? It's that basic life force stuff. So, when we get a low level of a lower acidity level due to high carbon dioxide levels, okay? Medulla receives this information, it sends down and targets the things that we can regulate for our breath. We need to make our volume bigger. How do we make our volume even bigger? Increase muscle contraction. And we can regulate the frequency of which we take our breath, so we can do it even faster. So in going from something that is a very low respiratory rate like we're doing right now, all we're moving is that normal tidal volume, about 500 milliliters we talked about, okay? We can start increasing that by bigger breaths, and we can do this more frequently, bigger and more frequently. So when you're finished with a run, you are panting almost, right? Yeah, where we've got too much carbon dioxide in the system, let's get it out, okay? So it is, right? What that does is bring oxygen back in, and that removes the carbon dioxide from the system. When the carbon dioxide leaves, what's going to happen to the pH of the blood? It's going to come back up, right? It's going to come back up. So we're going to use this as a system to control our breathing. It's all going to be based in carbon dioxide because we said we don't have oxygen sensors in our body. So here's the equation. Carbon dioxide is going to combine with water. That produces carbonic acid, H2CO3. H2CO3 dissociates into a proton, a hydrogen ion, right? And what's left here, HCO3 minus, is the buffer for blood, okay? It has a place to put hydrogens on, and we can send this back this direction, okay?
What is C3O?
That is
CO3.
bicarbonate. Okay, it's called bicarbonate. And bicarbonate is a buffer. Yeah. Formed bicarbonate in a proton. It's a good thing I put things down where I can read them. Alright. So here's the deal. When we are out of homeostasis with respect to breathing, if we have inadequate breathing, meaning carbon dioxide levels now are going to go up, pH is going to go down, okay? And you got to watch how they say this on those tests, okay? Because they'll mess with you a little bit that way, okay? As carbon dioxide levels increase, pH is going to decrease, okay? We send that information from the blood and the cerebrospinal fluid to the medulla oblongata. The medulla oblongata says, I got you guys. The pH is going low. I know what we need to do. We need to increase our breathing. To increase our breathing, we can target it two different ways: volume and frequency. Okay? Now, this doesn't have to just happen if it is carbon dioxide, because really what these sensors are receiving is the decrease in pH, right? So is it important for us to maintain blood pH? Are there other ways to make it acidic in our blood? Yes. So one of my wife's friends, her best friend, has a daughter, and her daughter is diabetic. She was a freshman at UNT at the time. All of her buddies, they were suite mates in the dorm. Okay? Her roommate and the suite mates, they left. She had a test on Monday, so she stayed to study for the test. She wears one of those pumps to put the insulin in, and she is insulin dependent. She does not make insulin that works in her body. So she has to have insulin, and she did not know it, but the pump loosened up and she was no longer getting insulin now. Okay, so she's studying. You know what you eat when you study, right? So she's trying to bolus her insulin levels because she's eating crap. Well, she's not getting the insulin though. So when the roommates, actually the suite mates, come home to the dorm, they can hear her in the room. She is unconscious, but her breathing is because of she's in ketoacidosis. Okay, her blood sugar levels are like 780, which it should be 100. Okay, she's unconscious. They roll the ambulance to the hospital. She goes, and she's in the hospital for weeks because you have to bring that down gradually. Okay, you can't just slap somebody down to 100 and they're okay. So it could be, so anything that causes this acidity can cause a change in this breathing. Okay, anything that does this. But the nice thing is it can be a pretty quick fix for us, right? We can do this, okay, release of carbon dioxide and help offset this acid. Okay, because what this equation says is if there's protons there, I can make carbon dioxide in water and nullify the acid. Okay, so that's kind of nice. So with some breaths, a lot of time, we can get rid of it. We talked about a yawn last time, right? Here in the gym, we did a lap, I don't remember. So in the gym, you see people all the time. They'll yawn at the gym. Okay, it is a one quick reset, right? You've been doing something, you've got a little bit too much carbon dioxide in your body at this point. How do we fix it? Well, let's do I just took a huge amount of air in and let out a lot of carbon dioxide, right? And now I'm reset. Okay, so you see that a lot at the gym. One big yawn fixes a lot. All right. So y'all remember hemoglobin? Hemoglobin is our protein inside the red blood cell. We said 280 million hemoglobin molecules per red blood cell. Okay, it has the iron in the middle of it, heme group, and then the protein part, right? Okay, the iron group is where the oxygen is going to bind, and we're binding O2. So think about how much oxygen we're delivering here. Okay, 208, over 1 billion oxygen molecules in that one red blood cell as it goes by. So when we say it's good, we get rid of this oxygen well. It's also how oxygenated you are as a whole, right? If my heart stops beating now, okay, that becomes an issue immediately. But I'm well oxygenated right now. There's a lot of oxygen in my body, and right now, I'm not using much of it. I'm dead, right? All we've got to do is keep neural function going here, okay? So that's why we can do this, okay? CPR, they say you have to push it on their chest to keep it moving, right? Keep it moving. Do we need to do it really well? Does it got to be great? No, okay? Just keep it moving, okay? We can throw a breath in there if we want to, okay? If that's something you're comfortable with, it can only help, right? But we are so close to where the fire station is, and I'm so oxygenated, y'all just keep it moving. Call 911, get them over here. Okay? They'll strap oxygen on and keep the CPR going. Okay? So, we move a ton of oxygen when you think about this. When it's going through the capillaries, we're delivering this oxygen, yet when we're working out at strenuous amounts, we're not delivering enough, right? That's why we can't do it anymore. It's not because we're not strong enough, okay? We've been doing it for a long time. It's that we've run out of ATP because we haven't delivered enough oxygen to the tissues. Give us a minute, we can do it again, right? We can run faster. Let me give you a break. So that's always, when the zombies are chasing you, you want to plan. Where am I going to stop and hide for a little bit, get your oxygen levels back up, and then run again, okay? Because you can't just run forever unless you're Forrest Gump, okay? Here's that hemoglobin molecule with its 4 hemes with the iron in the middle, and that shows you the oxygen bound to it. We learned some stuff. We learned that as oxygen makes its way into the capillaries, there are things that cause the oxygen to release easier from the hemoglobin molecule. Okay? It became a question to a lot of these scientists working with mammals is how does a whale stay underwater for an hour? When they're a mammal and all they're doing is taking one big breath. Right? They come up, they reach the surface of the water, through their blowhole they blow out a bunch of carbon dioxide, take in oxygen, and then they're down for the count for a while, right? For an hour. So there was research done on this, and they found that, first of all, the whale is not using a tremendous amount of energy when it's swimming. When they swim, it's a very slow, they got that huge tail, right? All I gotta do is lift it and move it back down. And lift it and move it back down. Okay? That's what's propelling them on. Okay? So we gotta have these muscles that can move the tail. You never see a whale just getting it, right? That's not the way they do it. Okay? So, they have a huge, their bodies are huge, they have huge lungs, yes. Okay? So there's a lot of oxygen movement that we can do, and there's a lot of carbon dioxide buildup that we can handle. Okay? So what we found out that helped the whale, okay, was that they sent oxygen to places that the pH was the lowest at first. Oxygen dissociates from the hemoglobin molecule better if it's at a lower pH. Okay? So, if we are actively working that muscle, we're producing ATP to keep it going, and one of the byproducts of that is producing carbon dioxide. So that carbon dioxide is going to bind with water right there and form carbonic acid, and the pH is going to go down. In actively used tissues, we can say the pH is going to be lower, right? Does that tissue require more oxygen now? Yeah, so this is a great thing. Actively used tissue receives more oxygen, okay, and that oxygen dissociates easier. It's easier to get that oxygen to let go of the hemoglobin molecule. They call it the Bohr effect. In the whale, that whale just kept sending that blood around and around and around. Do we use up all the oxygen that's in our bloodstream? No. We just went over that with me laying on the floor, and you just keeping it going, right? There's plenty of oxygen, and that's what the whale does. Back and forth, okay, until there's no oxygen available, and we're sending it where it needs the most, then we go get some more air. Okay, that's what the whale did. And we learned that we do the same thing. We put oxygen sensors in our legs. When we're working legs, the pH goes down in our legs. You get more blood, oxygen to those tissues when you're working legs than you do your arms. Okay? The second one is temperature. We found out that oxygen lets go of the hemoglobin molecule easier when the temperature is warmer. So if I'm working the legs, do the legs get warmer? That the oxygen releases from the hemoglobin molecule easier if it's warmer. if the temperature's going up, okay? So if I'm working my legs, does that working out cause heat? Yes. So that muscle gets warmer, you can feel it, okay? So is oxygen going to be delivered to my muscles that I'm working out better with temperature as well? So we get a twofer with this, y'all. When we're actively working these tissues, pH goes down, temperature goes up, we send more oxygen in those tissues than we do in other locations in the body. Okay? So, they did all kinds of studies on this. The pH effect was called the Bohr effect. Temperature effect is called the temperature effect. Okay? This is what happens. Notice as the pH goes this way, I deliver more tissue, more oxygen faster. Okay? Push me this way. As the temperature goes up, the same thing happens. I deliver more oxygen as the temperature goes up. Okay? So we get both of those helping us out.
Can we go back to the previous slide? Yeah, here, what do you mean by, you said as the pH goes this way, but do you mean it was?
As the pH goes down, so this shows you the graph when the pH is 7.6, 7.4, 7.2. We're delivering more oxygen to
I
tissues.
thought
Lower
pH
temperature.
was going down. No. I think it was going up, rather. If you go to the base, you have a 0 there. Go to the base.
Yes.
And it's going up.
Right. But these are the three different pHs that we're dealing with.
Okay.
Can you elaborate?
Yeah. So we actually deliver more oxygen, and we deliver, in both accounts, lower pH, higher temperature. Don't worry about that other one. Okay? Now in lab, I blew into a container that had water and phenol red. That was our pH indicator. And we turned the water and the carbon dioxide that I was exhaling it into carbonic acid, and we watched that pH go down. We watched an acid form. That's exactly what happens in our blood, okay? But we've got three different mechanisms to carry this carbon dioxide. One of the mechanisms is the carbon dioxide just diffuses into the plasma as a gas, okay? CO2 is going to come in. We get another 20% that gets bound to the hemoglobin molecule. Now, it doesn't bind to the iron of the hemoglobin molecule, it binds to the protein part of the hemoglobin molecule. So it doesn't affect our ability to carry oxygen. Okay? Remember what carbon monoxide did?
Binds to the iron.
It binds to the iron. And that means we can't bind oxygen to it. This is not what carbon dioxide does at all. Okay, so it works great. Okay, then the remaining 72%, so we had 8 and 20, that's 28. The rest of it, the 72% that's left over, diffuses into the red blood cell, where there is an enzyme called carbonic anhydrase. And what carbonic anhydrase does is it catalyzes the reaction where carbon dioxide comes in contact with water and we produce carbonic acid inside of our red blood cell. How long did it take me to turn it yellow? Blowing into it. A few seconds, right? Think about it if we got an enzyme. This is going to happen quick, right? Much quicker. Okay? So we got an enzyme that's going to help us with this. And the nice thing is, because of this, we produce that bicarbonate ion and that individual proton this way, inside the red blood cell. This gives us buffering capacity for the blood, where we can deal with more acidity. Because we're going to carry this carbon dioxide now to the lungs. Okay? Not as carbon dioxide, okay, but as bicarbonate, as this carbonic acid, we can call it. Okay? And when we get to the lungs, we do something called the chloride shift. There's chloride here, and there's hydrogen here. So we can do this flip and convert it back to carbon dioxide. And that allows us then to get rid of it. So we get to do a lot of buffering capacity in the blood this way, but we can rapidly go backwards, produce the CO2 and get rid of it to help us maintain the pH. Okay? this shows you that when the carbon dioxide that is made in the tissues, say this is our muscle tissue, when it moves in at the capillary, we've got 3 places for it to go. 8% dissolved in, 20% combining with the hemoglobin molecule on the protein part. The other 72% gets hit with carbonic anhydrase, and we form our old buddy carbonic acid that can disassociate, okay? Now, we can kick this out and become the buffer for the blood. We can send chloride in, and that can help us gobble up this hydrogen, okay? So, we get a twofer this way.
What do you mean by bicarbonate acid forming as a profile for the blood?
Because there is this receptor for protons, what's left. If we have a proton, we can make water and carbon dioxide. Okay? That bicarbonate ion is ready to accept any acids that you have and convert them to water and carbon dioxide. And we know how to get rid of carbon dioxide. Okay? Yeah?
What did you say it was called when it reconverts the carbon dioxide in water?
Chloride shift.
Chloride shift?
Chloride shift. Okay? And then this is us converting it back. When we get to the lungs, okay, we're going to go backwards. We've got to form the CO2 to get rid of it. So what we've got now is the bicarbonate ion and the proton that we can convert to carbonic acid. The carbonic acid can go back to water and carbon dioxide, and we get rid of the carbon dioxide. And is it ever a problem to have water in our system?
Yeah.
No. Okay? So it's a winner-winner chicken dinner type thing. Okay?
So you're saying that the hemoglobin plus the carbon dioxide, what does it do to, in the first RBC, the red blood cells, you have the hemoglobin plus carbon dioxide.
So if nothing happens to that carbon dioxide, it just binds to the to the protein on the hemoglobin molecule, so we don't have to convert it to anything. It's just going to go out
So,
when it gets to the capillary.
okay, so what happens where you have the carbonic and the next red blood cells? So
Okay.
what happened there?
That's when we converted it to carbonic acid earlier, because we have the carbonic anhydrase. This is taking the equation backwards to produce carbon dioxide and water so that we can get rid of the carbon dioxide.
Okay, was it because of the enzyme that the
It facilitated the reaction to make carbonic acid.
oh, if I say the action to make carbonic acid, then after it makes the carbonic acid, at what point does it becomes carbon dioxide and water?
When we take it back the other direction. Okay, when we get to the
Is
lungs,
is it a kind of counter-current thing?
not really countercurrent, but this is a reversible reaction. It can go either direction. We're forcing it to go one way to carry it easier. When we get to the lungs, we need to send it back so we get rid of the carbon dioxide. Okay, so this is what's going on. Okay? Over and over and again, because we know the circulatory system, hopefully this makes perfect sense to us. We've got the red side of the heart and the blue side of the heart that we can see up there, right? The red side is for oxygenated blood, the blue side is for deoxygenated blood. Okay? If we start out the red, and we're at the heart, we've already oxygenated the blood in the lungs, right? We've gotten rid of the CO2 that we were carrying, we've oxygenated the blood that is in the heart. So now we're sending it out to the body as oxygenated blood, oxyhemoglobin, we would say. Okay? And that oxygen gets sent out to the tissues. So it's going to go from the elastic arteries to the muscular arteries to the arterioles down to the capillaries. Probably just the regular old capillary, which is the continuous capillary. In the muscle, where now there's a greater amount of oxygen in the blood than there is in the tissues. Oxygen is going to diffuse across because it's lipid soluble. Okay, blows that phospholipid bilayer, and we oxygenate the tissues. Likewise, the tissues have been working, maybe not very hard, maybe very hard, and they've been producing some amount of carbon dioxide. Could be a great amount, could be not very much, depending upon how much we work. But there's always going to be more carbon dioxide in the tissues if we're alive than there is going to be in the bloodstream. So carbon dioxide is going to be moved from the tissues into the bloodstream, from high concentration to low concentration, right? Now we've lost the oxygen. Now when I say lost the oxygen, I don't mean every bit of it, just the needs that were there in the body, right? Part of the reason that we are breathing just a little bit right now is because we're well oxygenated, right? We don't have to keep adding a ton because we're not doing a whole lot. We just keep sending, like the whale, we just keep sending that blood around that's got oxygen on it, okay? So, now that we're headed back to the heart via the venous system, right? That systemic venous system, we have higher amounts of carbon dioxide and lower amounts of oxygen. It comes back into the heart, atrium, then into the ventricle, and then we pump it out the pulmonary trunk, which is an artery, to the lungs, right? When we get to the lungs, atmospheric gas has only 0.03% carbon dioxide. We got a lot more than that inside the blood. Carbon dioxide's gonna leave. Inside of our lungs, we've got 21% oxygen that's in the atmosphere. There's a whole lot more of it in the lungs than there is in our tissues now, in our blood, right? So oxygen comes into our tissues. We get rid of the carbon dioxide, we pick up oxygen. It binds to the hemoglobin molecule, and away we go again, right? So it's almost like the circulatory system was built to carry the oxygen, right? Which is exactly what it was. That's why we have it, okay? There are some organisms, y'all, that y'all remember that interventricular septum that separates the ventricles? There's some animals that don't have a 4-chambered heart, they have a 3-chambered heart. They got 2 atria, and they got 1 big ventricle. Now what happens with that? That means blood coming into the right atrium is deoxygenated blood, right? And blood coming into the left atrium is oxygenated, and they're gonna mix here. And when we pump the ventricle, some oxygenated blood and some deoxygenated blood is gonna go to the lungs, and some oxygenated blood and some deoxygenated blood is gonna go out to the body, right? Because there's no wall between it. So when you squeeze the ventricle, okay, do you think this is very, very effective? So how big are these organisms?
Small.
They're small. Okay, we're oxygenating it. They don't need a lot of oxygen. They're small. It's a good system. Where do we see this? We see this moving from fish into the amphibians into reptiles. Okay, there was a big question. Did dinosaurs, they were huge, did they have a 4-chambered heart? Okay, we don't know that. We've seen some evidence that supports there was something, okay, but we don't know that.
Was it the atmosphere during the time of the dinosaurs? The atmosphere.
And we've had to do ice sampling of that.
Okay.
Where we get the atmospheric, what's in the bubbles of that, and it holds pretty well. Okay. I read something that said if the Earth is 4.6 billion years old, and we made that 46 minutes, not years, millions of years, billions of years, that we've been on the planet for 4 hours. Humans have been on the planet for 4 hours. I was like, wow, that's kind of cool to do it that way. Okay, so. And in that time, we've screwed it up more than any other organism, okay? And that was the end to that statement, okay? We've seen the greatest loss of diversity of organisms and all kinds of crap we went into. So, but yeah, there's a lot to this. A lot of people think there's no way a dinosaur could be that big unless it had a better circulatory system than a 3-chambered heart. And I tend to agree, okay? We see it more in alligators and crocodiles. They have a lot more of a 4-chambered heart situation. But they're huge too, right? So, that was interesting. All right. All kinds of homeostatic imbalances, okay, that we're gonna find with this. Yes, sir?
I was wondering, we've talked about how carbon dioxide is potentially fatal to the body. There's too much of it inside the body. But is there something with where we can have too much oxygen?
Absolutely. Oxygen falls into that category of being a selective factor for us, okay, where too little or too much can kill us, okay? So too little oxygen, too much oxygen, we actually have oxygen toxicity, okay, where our bodies can't handle that. We can handle pure oxygen for a very short amount of time. And even if you think about somebody is on oxygen where they just have those two little things at their nose, pumping it in, you're still getting atmospheric oxygen with that, right? It's not being stuck in you like you've got this thing over you like this, right? And when they have that over you, they're not giving you pure oxygen, okay? It's a blend of chemicals, like what atmospheric is, okay? It can have more oxygen in it, but it's not gonna be 100%, okay? So, asthma, anybody got asthma? Okay, when you have asthma, we find that the bronchioles get dialed down through bronchial constriction. Okay, we constrict the bronchioles when an asthma attack is happening. Okay, what this means is there is less oxygen getting to those air sacs, right? That means when we are uploading this into the bloodstream, we're not getting enough. Okay, so this feels like we are suffocating. Okay, and if you've got an inhaler, it has a bronchial dilator in it, which causes that autonomic response to switch over. Remember, it's either the parasympathetic division's winning or the sympathetic division's winning, right? So we want to open it back up, okay? And allowing for good oxygen. And it's almost immediate a lot of times, right? When you do the bronchodilator, okay? Emphysema. This was the destruction of the alveoli, okay? A lot of people that were smoking and stuff like that ended up with emphysema because we actually lose the alveoli here. In losing the alveoli, now you don't have that exchange surface available to you. So instead of having 35 times the outside of your body, let's say you end up with 15 times. That's not as much, okay? And these people have to be on a higher amount of oxygen a lot of times. And emphysema was shown to be in smokers a whole lot. That's one of the reasons that they contracted this disease. So these people still are smoking with emphysema a lot of the time. And you can see these people outside the hospital with their little pull behind them oxygen. They've got it in their nose and they're outside smoking.
Can you imagine?
Yeah,
Oh, God.
makes you wonder. But they're also pretty old, right? When you get to that stage.
So, like emphysema or tuberculosis, once the damage is done to alveoli or the sacs, can that be reversed to a degree? Like the liver, you know how like the liver can regenerate
Right.
itself?
So they say that if you smoke, that after 7 years of not smoking, there is no, if they cut into it, they can't find the tar and the nicotine anymore. You're completely like a non-smoker. Okay? Now, I'm not saying that the damage, you just can't find the same stuff. That is a lung from a smoker. You can see the
Of
dark
course, yeah.
colors and that kind of stuff. That is all of that stuff that the filter doesn't catch on them. Okay? And if you're somebody that doesn't smoke, if you smoke and you have a non-filtered cigarette, all that goes in, right? When you smoke a cigar, you're not supposed to inhale the cigar down into your lungs, right? Okay? So, lots of issues with that.
Is emphysema what they did all those commercials on, like call now if you were exposed to like
No, that's
COPD, isn't it?
that's more COPD due to asbestos.
So asbestos can cause.
So the asbestos, it's like insulation.
Shards
Very
of glass.
small little fibers that you inhale, and it would pass through the system and get into your lungs. And then it causes a really almost an autoimmune type of issue inside. Okay, so that's what that one was from. Yes, sir.
So what is it when the throat like is going? It's like they can't speak without a machine.
It could be some kind of a cancer that's there that affects the larynx where the vocal cords are, that kind of stuff. It can be crushed. where it no longer works anymore, all that cartilage, okay? So yeah, that's multiple ways it can happen. Okay? All right, tuberculosis, bacterial infection that really reduces the surface area also that we're able to do this exchange. And then, as I have told many classes, I took over from the professor, and she smoked. She believed that smoking did not cause lung cancer.
What?
Okay, that's what she believed. And this is in science, as that case study kind of explained. In science, you never prove anything in science. It's not our job to prove anything. Okay? What science does is do research, do experiments that either support what we're thinking or it disproves what we're thinking. You either get a yeah or a no, right? And I'll be honest, most of the time it's the no. Okay? Sometimes we get the yeah. Okay? So if we do experiments that say, okay, here's the people that have smoked, and these are the people that have lung cancer, and those are the ones that smoke. 90% of people that have lung cancer have a history of smoking. Now, does that show causation? No, not at all. Okay?
Why did you say it doesn't so common? If 90% of lung cancer doesn't have a history of smoking, is that not enough causation?
But all it's showing is a relationship between that. It's showing a relationship between smoking and lung cancer.
Okay,
We
does
don't
it
know.
mean there are other factors that cause it? Is that why you said?
Yeah, there could be some others, right?
Okay.
I worked out, so I wanted to motorcycle y'all one time. Okay? And my wife was against it. No, you're gonna die. You leave me with all this crap, you know, I don't want you to, you know, blah, blah. I'm like, I don't want a motorcycle, you know. And she said, they're not as safe as a car. And I said, and I looked up, had the statistics. Do you know that actually fewer people die in a motorcycle accident, okay, than somebody in a car? Right? More people die from car accidents than motorcycle accidents.
Fewer people die in airplane accidents than car accidents.
Yeah, sure. Okay?
You're still not
But
getting
the
a
issue is how many people are riding motorcycles versus how many people are driving cars, right? There's a whole bunch of people driving cars,
Than the motorcycle.
right? But there's not as many people driving motorcycles, so less people. So I tried this with her, and I pretty much had it. She was like, but then she figured it out. And I don't have a motorcycle.
How does secondhand smoke play into effect of like lung damage?
Yeah, and that's one of the things that they've done studies on. People that were, like both my parents smoked when I was a kid, okay? And that meant I was in the vehicle with them and the windows were rolled up, right? And they were smoking. Does that affect my lungs? Absolutely, absolutely. And we know that people that have been exposed to secondhand smoke also fall into this percentage that increases lung cancer, okay? But it's just being exposed to it. Why do people, we saw the same thing, y'all, in medieval times when you had a house that was heated by a fireplace, right? Yeah, it's wood. Are there carcinogens in the wood? Yes. Okay? So,
So was it affected them?
absolutely. People died from lung-related things back in the day because there was no other way to heat your home, though.
Even red meat is considered a carcinogen.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So, okay, so
Carcinogenic.
So, if science can't prove or disapprove, and there's no definitive thing, it makes sense to me why we have such a big debate now about if global warming is actually really happening. Because why?
Yeah, and listen to who's doing the talking against it. Because they're asking science to prove that it's happening, right? And that science doesn't do that. Okay? That's not what we do. We can say, look at the evidence. You make the decision based on this evidence, right? Here's all this evidence that we've come up with. What do you think? Okay, and that's why when they come up and they say to the DNA specialist that's there, and they say, did he kill his wife? Okay, we found blood samples, we analyzed the blood samples, and the blood samples match
His own.
yours. Okay, Alex's. How many people in the world have the same blood type and everything that we did DNA genetically as you? Well, this would occur 1 in 60 billion times. That's the answer. Okay? There's not that many people on the planet. Right? So what they're saying is, but can we say just from this that it's you? Is there somebody out there? Could there be somebody out there with the same? Yeah. Right? But are they in Denton, Texas? Right? Did they drive the, Toyota Corolla that was seen leaving, that was green, and you have a green? I mean, all of this, and that's what the prosecuting attorney will say, or the defendant. Is it possible there's somebody out there? Well, it's a 1 in 600 billion. Well, could there be? Well, yes. Right?
Yeah.
So you can't say, we try not to say never and always or proof. Okay? You prove nothing in science.
That bothers me.
Huh?
That bothers me.
But it's the whole thing about science then. It's a way of thinking about it then, right? Okay?
Okay.
I'm coming back to the question, what you said about the blood. I was thinking, there's something unique about the blood to each person.
Well, like we're talking about with this, we can identify differences in individuals through their blood. If you have an identical twin, do y'all have the same?
Yeah, because that is.
So now there's an issue. And that's been a big deal, y'all. There's been a bunch of people that identical twin shows up later in life. They never knew they had one, and it was an identical twin. Right? That kind of thing. Yes?
You're talking about identical twins. There was a case of identical triplets.
Yeah.
They were all separated at birth, and they met at college. He met the first one because they said he looked like him, and he did. And they all did the genetic testing, and they were like, "You're basically the same person."
Yep. Yep. My wife did research on armadillos. When the one sperm meets one egg in the armadillo, and it splits 4 times every time. So you get 4 identical quadruplets. They're all either male or they're all female.
Wow.
They're all exactly the same.
Now, is that dangerous for the species?
Well,
Because
it
of
should
infection?
increase inbreeding, right?
Yeah.
And that's what my wife's research was about. How do armadillos handle this?
How do they handle it?
And we don't know. We really
Yeah, like-
we found that in island populations where the armadillos couldn't leave, they had the same variability that they did in open populations. So we were like,
Yeah, but if they're in an isolated area, they wouldn't have contact with, I guess, antigens from an outside, like diseases from an outside source.
okay,
Okay? So there's
that's not about who you're breeding with.
Yeah, but that's the thing. Like, if something came into that sterile environment for them and started affecting one, so it's going to affect all of them, right? Because they all have the same genetic.
Oh yeah, I mean if it's bad genetics, then yeah, you got 4 with bad genetics, right?
Okay.
But imagine that there's 4 of you, right? There's 4 of you, and there's 4 of everybody. What's the chance that you and one of your brothers are going to get with the same female, Now we've got not just the same 4, we got all the babies from that are all now all the same.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So it really changes.
Whoa, then your
Yeah, it's
cousin
kinda
would be
cool.
the same.
I've seen that before.
Person is
There was like a case about these 2 women and 2 brothers or whatever, they were sister and brother, and they were like, we think it'd be cool if we had married, had kids, but they had kids with the wives' other husband,
Oh,
and it's just like,
gross.
it was like all crisscross. It was weird. So like there was a couple and a couple, but those couples exchanged. And
I've heard about parties like that.
they yeah, but like all the kids look all alike.
I think they're called
So do the
swingers.
kids look at
Yeah,
They're
but
all
whatever,
identical.
like, if you had like an
Parents are all
identical twin, and your husband had an identical twin, and you guys like to swap, and
Well,
they
wouldn't,
made separate
wouldn't they be the
babies,
same?
and you guys
Wouldn't
made
the
separate
cousins be the
babies, there's-
exact same person?
Yeah, it wouldn't even happen in the first
No, you
place.
don't need to.
No,
And they had twins, and then the other couple had twins.
Yes.
So like,
Twinning
it
is
was-
genetic.
it's
There's
just
a greater,
weird.
yeah, it runs in families.
If an identical twin became a babe to her sisters, would they both be technically the mom?
Yep.
I think they're twins on both sides.
Genetics is cool.
It is to a certain extent.
Okay.
Sorry. we
I don't
just-
think this is the real reason as to why dinosaurs had became extinct.
You think it was because they smoked?
No.
I think that is.
That was a good segue though.
No, I mean, no, it is
And
correct.
here's the problem, here's the
It's just that
problem with
it's
this too.
involuntary.
They had to be social about smoking. That's where, you know, everybody going out smoking together. Because look, their arms can't even reach their mouth, y'all. You gotta have somebody help light the cigarette for you. Somebody's got to pull it out
The
for
poor
you, right?
T-Rex.
So yeah, that's when it became a big social thing, is what I'm thinking.
Do you think
Okay.
they'd use their toes? You know, like if he sat on his bottom and he was like,
I don't know. That brontosaurus is gonna be not, toes aren't gonna be very great.
well, I'm talking about the T-Rex.
I don't know.
They went extinct because the meteor gave them all the lung damage at once.
What do they go to
I
volcano?
already said, no, that's fine.
Oh, they went to
Volcano.
Is that a Gary Larson cartoon?
All right, guys, the next chapter that we do is the digestive system. Okay? And the digestive system is long. Okay? Let's see.
But it's not part
It is
of the
not,
exam.
it is not on this lecture test that we're having when you get back. Okay? So it's really, we're gonna do lymphatic, immune, and respiratory. That's gonna be a lecture test. But in lab, we're gonna do respiratory digestion and then take a lab test over that too. Okay? So when we get back from spring break, I'm gonna bust this out, digestion, and then we'll probably have, like the week after, maybe it might be 2 weeks after, a lab test. So the lecture test when you come back, and then probably our lab test over respiratory and digestion. And then all we've got left is urinary and reproduction in lab. We got another one, we got metabolism to cover in lecture along with that. Okay? Now reproduction takes us forever because it's kind of like the nervous system, because there's actually boy parts and girl parts we got to deal with, and how they do it is completely different, right? Girls are real lazy about it, although they jump on it really early in their life. Like before they're born, they already have all their eggs. In fact, they got more than they started with when they're born.
So guys don't have all their sperm when they're born?
No, we don't start making sperm till puberty, right? But then, what do y'all do once a month? Y'all release one egg. I make millions of sperm. In fact, I just made 1 million probably right there. Talking. I made a bunch more right now. I don't care. I'm just right here in front of you making sperm. That's what I do. All right.
Stop
Y'all
making
have a
sperm
great
and
spring break. Okay. If you got questions, I'll be around over spring break. Holler at me.
You see me in school.